Recently, the Canadian Pediatric Society said that a healthy childhood should involve outdoor play, which would include risky behavior. Uh-oh. I'm Larry Fedoruk, and this is Later That Same Life. Each week on this podcast, a different topic, discussion, or story from our lives.
Season 12, Chapter 1.
Go play outside.
This week's podcast will be like a sequel to my podcast number 112, called Free Range Kids. If you don't feel like going back to that entire presentation, let me summarize. In Free Range Kids, I talked about the modern generation of helicopter parents, always hovering, bubble wrapping the offspring, and not letting kids be kids. In that episode, I shared the story of Lenore Skenazy. Good story bears repeating. Back in 2008, Skenazy was a columnist for a New York City paper. One day at a Manhattan department store with her 9-year-old son, she declared that it was time to go home. Her son didn't want to go home yet. He wanted to stay and look at some other fun stuff. So she made a decision. Lenore armed him with subway tokens, a subway map, some quarters for the phone — he didn't have a cell phone yet — a $20 bill, and told him that he had to be home by 5. She admits that when she got home, she worried and stressed a lot all afternoon. But right around 5, her son arrived home. Joyous, ecstatic, emboldened by what he had accomplished on his own. Days later, she decided to write about that adventure in her New York column. By the next day, the word was out. Lenore Skenazy, world's worst mom, leaving a 9-year-old to ride the subway alone in New York City of all places. Hello, Child Services? She took a lot of flack, but it also struck a chord with many others. She did the talk show circuit, sometimes with her son in tow, talking about how great it made him feel to be trusted and responsible. Skenazy went on to write a book. It's called Free Range Kids, and also to start a foundation, Let Grow, which now works with psychologists and schools and parents, and kids get assignments to accomplish something on their own, something perhaps that they weren't allowed to do on their own up till then. Could be something a lot simpler than trying to figure out the transit from Manhattan, but they get to do it themselves. It's been a resounding success. I've become a huge fan ever since I learned about Free Range Kids, and I did that podcast about it. Again, number 112, if you're going back. And now the Canadian Pediatric Society, a group of learned men and women, scientists, doctors, experts in the area of child rearing, have said healthier childhood, play outside, risky behavior. How will that, and does that, sit with parents today? Well, let's delve into this a bit, because there are still parents out there, maybe already grandparents, who are fond of saying, in my day, we didn't wear those helmets, there's no seat belts, life jackets, all of our toys were made of lead, and we turned out okay, we made it. Well, yeah, some of us did, many didn't. That's why we introduced safety measures, and I'm all for those. Even Free Range Kids' mom, Lenore, makes her son wear a bike helmet. Of course, now he's in his 20s. I imagine he makes his own safety decisions. I'll venture to say he probably makes even better adult decisions because he was given some of that responsibility much earlier in his life. I think that when the Canadian Pediatric Society also said risky behavior, that's what got a lot of parental attention. And you know what some of those parentals can be like? They want the parental advisory. Speaking of, on a side note, remember the hoopla in the 1990s when Tipper Gore, also then the wife of U.S. Vice President Al Gore, She suggested parental advisory labels. Some viewed it as an artistic restriction, even censorship. I didn't. I thought that was a fair ingredients label. You know, you pick up a can of beans, how much salt, sugar, MSG, and you pick up a music video. How much frontal nudity, F-bombs, violence. Ah, I see. I care, or I don't. But, thanks for telling me. Thanks for the parental advisory. I remember at first I wasn't sure how exactly to take the phrase parental advisory. Was this an advisory to the parents that your child may be consuming content beyond their capacity? Or was it a message to the child to seek a parental advisory before watching the content? Well, it can't be that last one. Parents aren't advisors. They're cops. Mom and Dad, can I watch this? It's got a parental advisory sticker on it. No. No is the parental advisory go-to word. No. But why? 'Cause I said so. Ah, yes, good reasoning. I can certainly build on that advice. As a parent, you can't go wrong with no. Yes, takes too long. I don't got that kind of time. Maybe is a poor placeholder. You'll be called on it later. So the answer is no. Tipper Gore, I'm sure she meant well. But a parental advisory sticker on something a youth might be exposed to? For the parents, it might have been a no, but for the youth, it meant must see. Yeah, thanks for the parental advisory, but here's my juvenile advisory. I'm watching this. But back to the Canadian Pediatric Society. Play outside, including risky behavior. What is the parental advisory on that? Well, they've included some. They define risky play as thrilling and exciting forms of free play that involve uncertainty of outcome and a possibility of physical injury. Eek, physical injury. I was with you right up until that part. Yeah, but thrilling, exciting, uncertainty of outcome, possible physical injury. Didn't I just describe soccer, riding a bike, or even crossing the street? Further, the pediatricians have offered categories of risky play, and they also emphasize that you as a parent have to assess your own child's age, size, personality, development, and so forth before you say, give them free access to the oxyacetylene welder. Risky behavior, category 1, playing at height. That's your climbing, your jumping, and the like. 2 is playing at speed, bicycle, scooter, skateboard, tobogganing. 3, play involving tools. Recommended here is adult supervision in building using saws and hammers and screwdrivers, etc. Yeah, I got the 5-year-old installing a stove, and the 3-year-old is assembling the armoire from IKEA. When I was a kid, my dad was into carpentry. I was always his helper. Hey, Larry, can you come out to play? No, I got to work with Dad today. Only realized much later that was my play. That's a nice coffee table. Yeah, I built that. Dad helped. Number 4 is play involving potentially dangerous elements. That's like your wrestling, roughhousing, or anything that might involve getting lost or disappearing, like going out hiking or exploring. 5 is play involving impact. You're bumping and crashing into each other. Note that there's no body checking in tyke hockey. 6 is vicarious play, which is watching other children, usually older ones, engaging in risky play. Playing at height, playing at speed, tools, danger, impact, and vicarious. That's what they call risky play. And they also rightly point out that most risky play takes place outdoors, as opposed to the safe, padded, rounded corner confines of the family home. The physical benefits would be obvious. A child is getting outdoors doing things. But what about the mental benefits? In various school studies of rough and tumble play at recess, there was a lot of pushing and shoving, but there was less bullying. Kids were more resilient, developed better conflict resolution skills, had lower conflict sensitivity, and higher self-esteem. And when they got back into class after the rough and tumble recess, concentration was better. Also, kids had better socio-emotional skills and a greater sense of belonging. They learned communication, cooperation, and compromise. As a result, reduced uncertainty and definitely reduced anxiety. So this is all great, right? Well, yeah, right, but you said that thing about possible physical injury. Well, the studies show that most of them are minor. You know, the scraped knees and the bruised ankle and the like. And again, this is why we've improved things like playground padding and the material we use for the equipment. And if necessary for some of these activities, there are helmets and knee pads and elbow pads. Safety measures should be commensurate with the risk of injury. Let them get out and play. Be as safe as you can, but hey, every once in a while, your kid will get a boo-boo. Sometimes you can learn more from a scraped knee than from sitting safely in front of a screen. I'll quote again the 19th century social reformer Frederick Douglass. He said, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men," unquote. We'll give him his 1800s gender exclusion because, we know what you meant. We get the point. And let's not forget the first part of this parental advisory. Play outside. Get outside. That's just good advice for all of us, of any age. Get outside. What the hell is so great about the inside? Well, I know you got the big screen, the streaming, the video games, the smartphone, the social sites. These are all great, and we should set aside some time for them, too. But play outside. I'm old enough to remember our first TV. One screen. Entire house, one screen. One channel. Still, I was enamored. I watched whatever was on because it was on. Mother would have to chase me out of the house to go out and play. Shut off that TV and get outside. Why, what's outside? Well, you won't know until you get there. So, get out. This should have been a warning sign to all of us. Well, I guess it was. We just didn't really take to that parental advisory. I mean, once I was outside, I had fun. But really, even then, I would rather stay inside and watch a show about kids playing outside than go outside and play with kids. Sounds crazy, right? Well, remember the Outdoor Network? An entire channel of people having outdoor adventures that you would have to stay indoors on a couch in order to enjoy. Yeah, that makes sense. I've joked before, as many my age have done, that when we were kids, we left the house in the morning and we weren't expected home till supper. And if you weren't home by supper, after a couple of days, your parents would start asking around, "Hey, anyone seen Larry?" Listen, we'll never get back to those days. The world has changed, I acknowledge that. Even though there are less and less trees to fall out of, there are more places to get hurt. But we can still go outside and play some risky behavior. Recently, where I live, the city council banned tobogganing on over 45 hills that were on city property. The signs went up, "No tobogganing." Can you believe that? Thankfully, saner minds prevailed. I know it's a lawyered-up, litigious culture, but eventually the correct signs went up, basically saying toboggan at your own risk. Okay, well, thanks for your version of the parental advisory sticker. I just heard this thing about risky behavior. I'm going to give this a try. I've kind of struck a theme unintentionally over the last few weeks of this podcast about human contact. I think it's part of play outside. We've unwittingly created a society where human interaction is irrelevant to our own personal survival. But now we're beginning to realize that human contact is essential to our survival as a species. Go outside and play. Be among people. Let's call this next part a parable. I'm really not sure if it actually applies, but here goes. As a little kid in a small town, I wasn't much of an ice skater. I had skates. Dad offered to take me to the rink and help me out. He did a couple of times, but it was too embarrassing because all the kids my age could already skate pretty good. Down my street, across the road, at the edge of town, there was a frozen pond. Mom suggested that I put on my skates and go practice there all on my own. Great idea. I walk in my skates down the street, through the snow, and onto the pond. I practiced for like an hour, and then decided to make my way home. Well, while I was skating, a plow had gone down the street, and then a bunch of cars and trucks went over and created all these snowy ruts. I couldn't walk on that, not on my skates. It was impossible. I thought of taking off my skates and walking home in the snow in my socks, but I didn't want to catch pneumonia, because that's how you catch pneumonia, I'd heard. If I try and cross the street with my skates on, chances are I'll fall down and knock myself out. Then a car, or even worse, a big truck, would run me over. I walked up and down the street looking for a safer place to cross. There wasn't one. What to do? Unbeknownst to me, my mom had been watching this out of the window. She was checking the window here and there, just waiting for me to get home. She saw me standing there. All of a sudden, I disappeared from view. A minute or two later, I popped up again, and I walked the remaining block to our house. What happened? She asked. Well, I explained about the ruts and the skates and the danger, how I couldn't cross the street, and what I'd figured out was that the best way to not knock myself out in the middle of the street and get run over by a car or even worse, a truck, was to first look both ways to make sure no cars were coming. Then I would lay down and roll across the road, which I did. I know you're saying, what an idiot. Well, you're mostly right, but it worked, didn't it? I remember doing this. I remembered the entire thought process, everything about it. Although it was Mom who mostly told that story from that day forward, I think the point is I figured it out. A little kid. I thought it through. Problem, options, solution. Home safely. Covered in snow, but alive and pneumonia-free. And as I grew older, I would think back to my childhood and remember all the times that Mom and Dad would say, oh, just go do it. But how? Well, figure it out for yourself. And for a time I thought, boy, they could have been more helpful. But then I realized they actually did me the biggest favor ever. They made me think. They made me do. Skills that have served and still serve me well. Like I said, I'm not sure that's a great parable, but there you are. Kids can do more than we often give them credit for. Again, you have to gauge your own kid's ability, development, and temperament. Do not teach them how to swim by pushing them off the dock. And, no power tools until you're 7. Otherwise, take a risk. A parental risky behavior to allow your child's risky behaviors. Do you know how the risk-reward formula works? It's called the risk-reward ratio. You have to divide the amount you stand to lose by the amount you stand to gain. The investors prefer a ratio of 1 to 3, 3 units of reward projected for every unit of risk. Unit of risk, a scraped knee. Rewards, more resilience, better conflict skills, higher self-esteem. Risk, sprained ankle. Reward, better communication skills, cooperation, and a better sense of belonging. Even with this old ratio, investing in playing outside with risky behavior will result in a greater return. Go play outside. What's outside? Well, we won't know till we get there.
Later That Same Life is written, voiced, and produced by Larry Fedoruk. LarryFedoruk37 at gmail.com. Subscribe to Larry's podcast YouTube channel. Get automatic notifications with each new episode.